think we're all ready. Welcome everyone to the first Meet the Author session for Macondo. This is the third edition. And we have Hemley, who's all the way from France, but from Cameroon. Would you love to introduce yourself, or would you love to, I think for the both of you, introduce yourselves?
Do you want to do?
No, you should do, because I think they're here for you more than me.
I thought that I had choice. Okay, so I'm Hemley, je m'appelle Hemley. Je suis une romancière, je vis en France, mais je suis d'origine camerounaise.
I'm Hemley. I am a novelist. I live in France, but I'm originally from Cameroon.
Et j'ai publié 5 romans, et il y a un 6e qui va sortir en janvier.
I've written 5 novels, and the 6th one is going to come out in January.
Les jours viennent et passent. Days Come and Go, c'est mon premier roman qui est traduit en anglais.
Les jours qui passent, The Days Come and Go is her first novel that was translated in English, and also her first novel.
Yeah, it's the last one.
It's the
last one.
It's the last.
And the one translated in English. Et il y en aura un prochain aussi. Donc je vais revenir parce qu'il y a un prochain livre qui sort l'année prochaine et qui sera traduit en anglais aussi. Donc vous allez me voir souvent à Macondo.
And there is another one, the 6th one that is coming out soon. So she's going to be back, and you will be seeing her a lot in Nairobi.
Oh, yes. So we have something to look forward to. And yes, if you can, please do get a copy of Days Come and Go. It was really great company. I was telling Hemley, I had a bit of a cold last week, but I spent the whole week cuddled up with this. And we'll talk about it and also talk about you and your writing. But I guess I wanted to start with the obvious question, because you're here. The theme of the festival is disrupting home. A lot of your characters in this book are displaced. So for context, when we watch the performance, it follows a story of Anna and Abby. Anna is the mother, Abby is the daughter. Anna has a terminal illness, so we're watching her sort of write her history and try to collect her memory. And Anna is watching this process of, I guess, deterioration, but also her mother trying to collect the stories about herself, her past in Cameroon, and their life now in France. So the first question is, what is disrupting home to you?
J'ai essayé de répondre à la question hier pour ceux qui étaient là. Je vais un petit peu me répéter sur ce que est la maison, sur ce que ça signifie être à la maison pour moi.
She tried to answer the question yesterday. Sorry, I'm using she. I tried to answer the question yesterday. And so it will be a bit of a repetition for all the people who were already there yesterday at the opening, but I will try to explain what it is to be at home, what is disruptive to be at home for me.
Je suis née, j'ai grandi au Cameroun, et j'ai grandi dans un quartier populaire de Douala qui s'appelle Bonabéry, et où je considère que j'ai été très heureuse. Je considère que j'ai eu une enfance assez heureuse.
So I grew up in Cameroon in a quartier populaire, I don't know how to translate, a popular area of Doula, which is called?
Douala.
Douala.
And the place is called Bonabéry.
Bonabéry. And I can consider that I had a very happy childhood.
Et pourtant, il y avait énormément de violence dans l'endroit où j'ai grandi. De la violence dans la société, de la violence entre les hommes et les femmes, et de la violence contre les enfants. Mais ça ne me faisait rien. Pour moi, c'était normal. C'était juste l'endroit où on était. C'était aussi l'endroit où il y avait les amis, les jeux, l'école, la vie. Ma vie, c'était là. Et je n'imaginais pas qu'on puisse être ailleurs et être plus... Je ne rêvais pas d'autre chose.
However, there was a lot of violence in my childhood. There was a violence against the children. There was violence between men and women. However, the violence was normal to me. It was almost banal to me. And despite the violence, I never thought of going or dreaming of living in another place.
Et quand je suis partie de chez moi pour mes études et que j'ai donc commencé à visiter le monde, je me suis aperçue aussi que d'une certaine façon, j'étais construite, j'étais faite, c'est-à-dire que je savais d'où je venais. Hier, je racontais que j'étais à Lille. Lille, c'est une ville dans le nord de la France qui est très jolie et très froide. Et dans ma chambre d'étudiant, à côté de ma chambre d'étudiant, il y avait une autoroute. Et toutes les nuits, quand je dormais, je rêvais que je traversais l'autoroute et je me retrouvais dans la maison de ma mère. Toutes les nuits, je faisais le voyage dans mon rêve de Lille à Douala. Et pour moi, c'était tout à fait naturel.
However, I realized that when I finished my studies in Douala and when I went abroad, that I was already constructed, I was already made in a certain way. So as I was saying, I did my higher studies in Lille. It's a city in north of France, which is quite rainy and quite cold. And every night I lived very close to the highway, and every night I was able to take across the highway a route from which I could go back to Douala. So every night I was able to make this voyage, passageway between Lille and Douala.
Et après, je me suis installée à Paris, que j'aime énormément aussi, qui est l'endroit où je vis. Et je vais vous raconter une petite histoire qui est assez drôle. Je ne vis pas dans Paris même. Je vis dans un petit village pas loin de Paris qui est très très joli et qui est juste suffisamment éloigné de Paris pour qu'on puisse y aller et en même temps qu'on puisse en sortir tranquillement.
So after that I moved to Paris. Paris is a city that I love, that I adore tremendously. And today when I don't live in center of Paris, I live in a little village which is just on the outskirts of the city. It is enough of a distance that I can return back to Paris and that I can really enjoy all the cultural events and all the things that Paris offers.
Et à côté de ma maison, il y a un cimetière. Un de ces jolis cimetières qu'il y a en Europe où on peut manger par terre ou qui ne ressemble pas du tout au cimetière chez nous.
And just beside my house, there's a cemetery. And it's one of those really nice places, a cemetery where we can sit on the ground and we can eat, we can have a picnic, not at all like the cemeteries that we sometimes find here.
Et mes enfants, pour aller à l'école, ils devaient passer devant le cimetière. Et j'ai fini par réaliser qu'ils avaient peur. Donc ils ne passaient jamais devant le cimetière, ils contournaient le cimetière et ils passaient plus loin. Donc de temps en temps, ils arrivaient en retard à l'école.
And my children, I realized, did not like passing in front of the cemetery. They were scared of going close to the cemetery. So I recently realized that they were actually taking a longer route to go around the cemetery and often coming late to school.
Et un jour, ma mère était chez moi en vacances et on parlait ils en parlaient, ils disaient qu'ils n'aimaient pas ce cimetière. Et ma mère a dit, mais tu ne peux pas avoir peur de cimetière parce que les morts qui sont là ne sont pas tes morts. Ils ne te connaissent pas.
So one day my mother was there and the children were just saying that, we are scared of going to the cemetery. And the mother was like, why are you scared? These are ghosts that do not belong to you. You do not need to be scared about them.
They don't know you. In our tradition, the only dead person that can do something wrong to you is the person you know, a person of your family, the same blood. And these people, we didn't know them. They are strangers. They cannot do anything to them, to the children. And my son, who is a little bit, mon fils qui est un peu moqueur, il a dit, grand-mère, ça se voit que tu n'as pas vu Walking Dead.
So my son, who is like my heart, he said that it's good you've not seen The Walking Dead.
J'en parlais hier pour une autre anecdote, mais c'est aussi ça pour moi la maison. La maison, c'est un endroit où on te reconnaît, où même les morts te reconnaissent, en fait.
So yesterday, that is what I was trying to tell in a different aspect of the story, that home is where even the dead know you.
And that's interesting because in the book itself, it's, you know, as Anna is going through the phases of her ailment and trying to connect with her daughter, it's only through those moments of death that they're able to do that. I found it interesting that you chose to tell the story of the person who's about to die in first person and the person who's watching her in third person. Tell me about that.
C'est aussi, ce choix vient aussi de la façon dont se distribue la parole. Donc, Anna, c'est une vieille dame, et quand on la découvre dans le livre, elle est en train de mourir.
So this choice was also to give dialogue to the different personalities. So Anna, who is the older woman in the novel, is about to die.
Et elle arrive au terme d'une longue vie qui a été une vie où elle a fait énormément d'erreurs, mais aussi de silence complet. Anna, c'est une personne qui n'a jamais communiqué, ni avec son mari, ni avec sa fille. Et pourtant, elle est extrêmement intelligente, elle comprend parfaitement son environnement, et tout le livre, en fait, est sur ce qui se passe dans la tête d'Anna, et à quel point tout est clair et nuancé pour elle. Mais elle n'a jamais pris la peine d'expliquer, de parler, de communiquer avec les personnes qu'elle aime.
So Anna is coming to the end of a life, which was a life with a lot of mistakes. And it was a life lived with a lot of silence. She was someone who did not know how to communicate, to express her feelings to her children, to her husband. So she was coming to the end of her life, which she was quite coherent in what she thought, she was logical, but she had not communicated it to her immediate environment.
Pour arriver où elle a dû couper les ponts avec son passé, sa mère à elle, sa grand-mère, et elle n'a jamais parlé de son passé, ni à sa fille, ni à son mari. Donc elle ne peut pas parler. À partir du moment où elle a fermé des portes de sa vie, elle ne peut plus partager.
So she was coming at, she had not spoken about her past, neither to her child nor to her husband. So in order to, tu peux répéter parce que je pense j'ai oublié. She had broken the bridge
Oui,
with her past.
Avec le passé, et donc elle ne peut plus, elle ne peut pas communiquer.
Yeah. So she could no more communicate neither to her husband or her child about her past and what she had lived through.
Et à la fin de sa vie, en fait, elle regarde en arrière et elle se rend compte en fait de toutes les erreurs qui ont été commises et à quel point c'était grave. Ne pas communiquer, ça veut aussi dire ne pas transmettre. Ça veut aussi dire laisser le silence s'installer avec toutes ses blessures et avec toutes ses conséquences. Et là, à la fin de sa vie, parce que c'est l'heure de vérité en fait, c'est la dernière heure et c'est l'heure de vérité, Anna prend enfin la parole et elle prend la parole en jeu pour la première fois de sa vie.
So the fact that she had not communicated her errors that she had made, which were quite important, the bigger error was not to transfer it as well. And then the silence had installed, and
À quel niveau?
yeah, at a level that had really created, broken the links between the family. So there was a silence that had come around.
Yeah, and we were talking about that earlier, about how the fact that you're trying to pass on a history, but because there's been so many broken links over the years, these are all, it's generations of women trying to pass the story along to each other until we get to Anna and Abby. And then there was a moment where Anna herself is reflecting on the woman who raised her. And one afternoon where she comes to visit her, lifts her baby, and then disappears home, and it's not a spoiler, she dies. And then she thinks about this idea of tradition being passed down but inadequately. and she spent so much time fighting against tradition, fighting against her daughter being, these incisions that are put as a way of putting blessings. I know I fought with my mom about that with my son. Do you think in the end tradition won over when everything was now being passed down, or the tension between tradition and modernity? What do you think?
Anna et son mari Louis font partie de ce qu'au Cameroun en tout cas, de ce qui est la génération néocoloniale. C'est la génération qui est venue après la colonisation. En fait, ils ont tout inventé, ces gens-là. C'est les premiers docteurs, les premiers enseignants, les premiers avocats, aussi les premiers hommes politiques. Et ces personnes-là, moi, je pense qu'elles étaient extrêmement brillantes. En fait, elles venaient d'une génération en arrière, elles venaient de leur village. Elles parlaient pas français ni anglais, et elles sont rentrées dans l'éducation, et elles sont devenues ce qu'elles sont devenues. Mais ça supposait aussi d'abandonner des pratiques, d'abandonner une tradition, une spiritualité, de perdre le sens des choses, y compris la langue, y compris les... I speak too much. That's it. Please stop me.
You're speaking so well that I don't feel like stopping you. So Anna and her husband Louis, they were the first generation from Cameroon, which was the post-colonial generation. They came and they took up professions such as a doctor, engineer, a lawyer, and these were the people that had to invent everything. Nothing was made for them. So these were the people who had just left the village, and they did not even speak French very well. And they were according to me, according to Hemley, they were brilliant people because they were able to take up these jobs which demanded a lot.
Ils ont construit toute une société. Moi, je me suis souvent demandé, mais je le connais, cet homme, comment a fait le premier gynécologue qui s'est installé dans la ville de Douala et a commencé à travailler sur le corps des femmes.
I always pose this question, how did the first gynecologist who came and started living in Douala, how did the gynecologist work with the bodies of women?
Et c'est leur histoire, c'est aussi de leur histoire qu'il est question dans ce livre. Parce que cette génération post-coloniale est aussi la génération qui nous a menés où nous sommes aujourd'hui, dans l'Afrique où nous sommes. D'une certaine façon, ils ont échoué.
And this is the question that I pose because this is the generation, the post-colonial generation, which brought us here in Africa. And in a certain way, they failed as well.
Et le lien avec la tradition et la modernité, c'est ça aussi. C'est-à-dire que les personnes comme Anna, elles ont abandonné l'endroit d'où elles venaient. Mais elles ont abandonné parce qu'elles étaient obligées, mais aussi parce qu'elles étaient séduites. Il y a aussi une idée de séduction dans ce qu'on offre, dans la langue, dans la possibilité de se construire, d'être quelqu'un, d'être un monsieur, une madame, de savoir lire, etc. Et le lien avec Awaya qui vient pour scarifier sa petite fille, c'est aussi de lui dire, le passé reste, nous restons. Nous ne venons pas d'une tradition où il faut tuer le père ou la mère pour grandir. Nous venons de traditions où on avance avec son passé.
And I will require your help. It was also the fact that they let go of their tradition and that they broke up. J'ai oublié la première partie que tu avais dit.
Alors, lorsque je dis qu'ils ont dû abandonner leur tradition pour s'inscrire dans l'avenir et pour progresser.
Yeah, so they also had to let go of their traditions and the rituals from the village in order to move forward. But however, the past stays because the story of the girl who has a scar on herself, it tells you the story that the past remains. It remains engraved in your body.
And then also you talked about violence in your upbringing, and there's also quite a bit of violence in the book, obviously from Cameroon's own post-colonial legacy, as well as from the male characters. Do you want to tell us more about that?
Quand je dis que la violence fait partie intégrante de la façon dont le Cameroun s'est construit en tant que nation, il faut savoir, peut-être vous le savez, que le Cameroun, c'est le premier pays d'Afrique centrale, d'Afrique francophone, à avoir eu son indépendance.
So when I say that violence is an integral part of the society, it is important to know that Cameroon is one of the first country in Central Africa to have achieved its independence.
Et ça s'est fait après une guerre qui a été longue et meurtrière, vraiment.
It was after a war that was really long and which killed a lot of people.
Et après l'indépendance, quand le pouvoir a été remis aux Camerounais, ce n'étaient pas les bons, ce n'étaient pas ceux qui s'étaient battus. Le pouvoir a été remis à des personnes qui ont été mis là par la puissance coloniale pour continuer d'exploiter le pays.
And after the independence, it wasn't the people who were good who had defeated who got the power. It was the people who were
Qui ont été mis là par la puissance coloniale pour continuer d'exploiter.
It was the people who were in power who had positioned certain strategic people in order to take control of the country.
Et quand ces personnes sont arrivées au pouvoir, la guerre a continué. Donc eux, ils ont tué aussi les combattants de la liberté. Donc nous sommes entretués.
So once they came to power, they continued the civil war even after the independence. So it was us who were defeated, who were fought over in a certain way.
Et cette histoire a été complètement passée sous silence. Je ne l'ai pas apprise à l'école. Je n'en ai jamais entendu parler jusqu'à ce que je commence à travailler sur l'histoire de mon pays. On ne sait pas. On sait qu'il y a eu quelque chose de très grave, mais on ne sait pas exactement ce qui s'est passé.
So this story went under complete silence. This was not something that I studied at the school. There was no conversation about it. So only when I started working on my novel that I understood that there was this type of violence that had happened in Cameroon.
Oui, et pourtant cette violence, elle reste là. Le silence engendre encore plus de violence. Quand j'ai écrit mon précédent livre, Les Maquisards, il y a des gens qui sont venus me voir pour me dire « J'ai cru que j'allais mourir sans qu'on ne raconte mon histoire. »
And this silence remains, and the silence actually amplifies the violence. And when I wrote my last novel, Marifa, La Maquiza, there was someone who said that I thought I'm going to die and this story will never come out.
Et dans ma propre famille, je me suis aperçue qu'il y a des personnes qui avaient dû changer de nom. Je croyais que c'était leur nom. On a un ami de la famille, qui nous invite et qui nous dit pour les funérailles de sa mère. Chez nous, les funérailles, c'est un grand truc. Donc, il nous invite pour les funérailles de sa mère.
And there are people around who change their names. In my family, there was a funeral, and in the family, the funerals are big.
And we had a friend who invited us for the funerals of his mother. And I asked to my husband, sa mère n'était pas déjà morte?
Was his mother not dead?
Yes. Sa mère était morte, mais il ne l'avait pas enterrée au bon endroit. Il avait promis à sa mère de la ramener dans son vrai village. Et c'est là que j'ai compris que le village dans lequel on était, c'était une zone de pacification. C'était un camp de concentration. Et quand tu creusais en dessous, il y avait encore des squelettes. C'était pas le vrai village.
Wow. I hope I can translate that. So that is when they discovered that the mother was not buried at their spot. The mother had been buried in another spot, and they discovered that the bones, the skeletons, that it was a concentration camp, and the bones and skeletons were lying in a concentration camp.
Et parfois, quand des femmes allaient au champ pour cultiver la terre, parfois elles creusaient et elles tombaient sur des restes et elles refermaient et elles ne disaient rien. Et ça, on marche dessus. C'est la terre dans laquelle on vit.
And then there were women who would go to the fields, and then they would discover these skeletons, and then they would just continue to put the ground over it. So in a certain way, we are still walking over these skeletons and bones without talking about it.
Et ça influence tout. Ça influence la vie, ça influence la politique, ça influence la façon dont on se parle. Et dans ce pays-là, en marchant sur ces squelettes, et en fait, j'ai été une petite fille heureuse.
And that influences everything. We continue to walk over our dead, over the bones, over the skeleton, and I was a happy child, happy girl.
C'est juste pour dire le niveau de schizophrénie. C'est vrai.
I mean, yeah, ignorance is bliss. That's true. And I was thinking about now. This becomes a way of cataloging that. Given that you were not learning this in school or anywhere contemporary, who are you talking to? What were you reading to be able to surface those stories?
Alors, quand j'ai commencé, ça s'est passé d'une façon assez étrange parce que je regardais la télévision chez moi avec une très vieille personne qui était aussi en visite. On regardait une de ces choses horribles, une de ces guerres qui se passent partout dans le monde.
So I was sitting at the house. I was in my house with a very old woman, and we were watching one of those documentaries, maybe a series about the war.
Et tout d'un coup, elle m'a dit, tu sais, chez nous aussi c'était comme ça. Mon père a été tué pendant la guerre d'indépendance et ils l'ont torturé et ils ont jeté son corps dans notre cour. J'avais 10 ans, c'est moi qui l'ai découvert. Ma mère a été torturée, elle est devenue folle, mais je n'ai jamais raconté aux enfants. Et les enfants, c'était mon mari, il avait 50 ans.
And the old woman said, she confessed that, at our place as well, there was a lot of torture, that my father was killed, that my father's bones, his body was thrown in the passageway of the house. My mother was tortured as well, and it was me. I was 10 years old, and I had to pick up the body, and and I never told my children.
Yes, and the children she was talking about was my husband, and he was 50.
So this is the story.
So I said, in my own family, how is it? How is it possible? It was really a shock for me. And I started working on it. And I discovered so many things because things exist. But you have to look at it. You have to find it to understand the whole story. And when you talk to people, then they tell you, but you have to ask. Then they will say small things, and you have to make a link with all this and say, even in my own family, my own blood, I've been touched. I didn't know. How can I? Comment je peux ne pas savoir? Et si je ne sais pas, comment j'élève mes enfants? Comment tu transmets? C'est toujours la question. Qu'est-ce que tu transmets? D'ailleurs, qui tu es?
And if I do not, how do I not know? And now that if I do not know, how can I transfer this to my children? And then who am I? Who am I?
And I will bring in everyone just before this, or not just after this. So how do people receive your books in Cameroon? How widely read are they, and how much do they identify with their own stories? Do they also share their own stories?
À chaque fois que j'écris beaucoup sur l'histoire, les gens, etc. Et il n'y a pas tant de livres que ça qui sont écrits sur le Cameroun, sur Douala, Yaoundé, nos villes. La première chose que je peux dire par rapport à mon écriture, c'est que les gens sont toujours très heureux quand ils se reconnaissent dans les livres. En fait, j'écris aussi les livres qui m'ont manqué. De dire, je veux aussi que ma ville, mon quartier, ma tante, mon oncle, mes amis soient dans la littérature.
So when I started writing about it, I also started writing because there were not so many books on Cameroon, on Dula, on the environment, on the neighborhood. And the people who received it, they were very happy to find themselves, to identify themselves in the stories, and to find their neighborhood, their family in these stories.
And I also read the books that I would have liked
to read
to be
when I
written.
was growing up. Yes.
Does anyone have a question in the meantime? There's a section I do want to read where you describe a bit of Cameroon, but does anyone want to ask anything? Anything? So let me look for it, because I did love this. Let me just look for. So there's a bit where Anna is arriving at her husband's place after they've just gotten settled down and married because they've had a child. Cameroon is a rich mosaic of peoples and landscapes, but no place in it compares to the glittering, lush, untamed beauty of Bamileke country, especially not the cities where commerce takes place amid skin-crawling filth. All you have to do is step back a few kilometers from all that, head out to Mount Bambotus, where even the city of Chang has a fairy world-like charm. We arrived at sunset for my maiden visit to my husband's village, when the dying sun rays colored the sky with 1,000 shades of perfect saffron-infected azure. My father-in-law had built his house not far away in the Centre Climatique in Chang, the former getaway of the colonial masters, at an altitude of 1,400 meters on the flanks of the mountain. To get there, we drove past vast plots and fences cordoning off blooming hibiscus hedges, eucalyptus forests surrounded by creepers, tiny hamlets of huts with thatched cone-shaped roofs and walls made from mud and plaited raffia bamboo, as painstakingly put together as a bird's nest. I really did love that. So I guess, I don't know how much more time we have because we started a bit late, but I guess we have to wrap up. Do you have, among the books that you've written, one that you think is very, very dear to you?
This question.
Who's your favorite child?
I think no, I don't. All the books, tous les livres appartiennent à des étapes précises de ma vie. Et ils restent chers à mon cœur.
All the books belong to a certain phase of my life and they remain very dear to me.
Mais le livre qui a été le plus marquant, qui a marqué une rupture, c'est Les Maquisards, celui que j'ai écrit avant celui-là, où précisément c'est venu de cette prise de conscience que j'ai eue de mon pays. Ça a changé ce que je voulais écrire.
But the one that marked a rupture was the one called Makiza, which I wrote right before, because there was a prise de conscience, this understanding, this real deep comprehension of what had happened in Cameroon, in my country.
Et à partir de là, j'ai eu... ce n'est pas que je préfère ce livre, mais non. Je les aime tous. Mais ça a marqué vraiment quelque chose dans... Oui, c'est ça que je veux écrire. C'est à partir de là que je veux décrypter le monde.
And it's not that I prefer this book, no. I love them all. But it is in this that I had the understanding that this is what I want to write about, that I want to deconstruct this world around me.
parce que c'est aussi à propos de ce que tu ne sais pas que tu ne sais pas. Je ne sais pas comment dire.
I'll try. And there's also something about what you don't know, you don't know.
Yes.
So,
Et pourtant, ça va encore être plus difficile. I will complexify it. Et pourtant, tu savais.
however, you always knew.
Yes. Vous comprenez ce que je veux dire? Pourtant, dès que tu entends l'histoire, quelque chose en toi te dit, bien sûr, tu savais.
However, as soon as you hear the story, there's something inside you that tells you, you always knew this.
Yeah, and I found it interesting when we're talking about, your work now in translation. This is your first book being out in English, which means a bigger audience will be able to read it. And how you feel about that possibility, and how much control do you have over the narrative, or how it is interpreted, rather?
Alors, je pense que la traduction est une chance énorme pour un écrivain, vraiment, parce que ça ouvre des horizons insoupçonnés et ça crée des liens. Moi, j'écris pour créer le lien, pour être lu, pour rencontrer des gens. Et la traduction offre une espèce de boulevard à propos à ce sujet-là.
For me, a translation is a big, big opportunity for any author. Because then it can reach places where it can arrive in soupçonné, like you can really feel it in little crevices. And the translation allows it to reach this big boulevard. I love the phrase that you've used, so I'm really trying to stick to the poetry of your words. This big avenue so that so many people can access this book.
Mais le problème, quand on est un écrivain, avec la traduction, c'est que quand tu écris, tu maîtrises chaque mot, chaque phrase, tout le livre, tout t'appartient, ça vient de toi, ça vient de ton cœur, ça vient de ta tête, c'est ton livre.
And so when you write, you know every word, every metaphor, every title. You own every part of the book. This book is a part of you.
Et quand c'est traduit, tu sais plus.
And when it's translated, you don't know.
C'est pas ta langue, c'est pas tu lâches prise parce que tu ne sais pas. Ce n'est pas tu ne maîtrises plus la langue.
And it's not your language. You're not an expert of the language, so you have to let go. You are not the expert of that language in that way.
J'ai été invitée en Allemagne parce que le livre a été traduit en allemand. Et les Allemands ont une façon de faire des performances comme on a fait aujourd'hui, sauf que ça dure 1 heure. Donc, ils lisent ton texte en allemand pendant 1 heure.
So I very recently went to Germany because the book has been translated in German. And in Germany, they do this performance like the way we saw today, a dramatized performance. However, it lasts 1 hour. So I heard the German translation of my book by a German person for 1 hour.
Et je n'avais pas la moindre idée de ce qu'il disait. Quand il riait, je ne savais pas pourquoi il riait. C'est mon livre, mais j'étais larguée.
And I had no idea what they were saying. I mean, they laughed at places, and I had no idea why were they laughing at the sections that they were, and I felt completely out of it.
C'est mon livre, c'est mon travail, mais à ce moment précis, ça ne m'appartient pas.
It's my book, it's my work, and at this moment, it does not belong to me.
C'est ça aussi, la traduction.
That is also translation.
Oh yeah, it is for everyone anyway. So everyone who's here, please do get a copy. I thought it was lighthearted, it was funny, it was sad, but also, this passing on of a legacy that I absolutely loved. So thank you so much.
Merci, thank you so much.
I guess if anyone has any questions, we do have a bit of time. So, great. Do we have a mic?
Hello, thank you very much, and thank you, Hemley Boum, or is it Emily Bloom? Sorry if I'm mispronouncing. I haven't read your book, so I'm looking forward to reading it, but what I've heard and listened to is fascinating. I'd like to know, why would you think it's important that we tell our histories, even the violent ones, we as Africans, that have been swept under the carpet? We must tell them, we must bring them out, we must uncover them, and what that does for ourselves and our future generations, and from a female perspective.
J'ai beaucoup réfléchi à la question parce que l'idée, c'est souvent de se dire, est-ce qu'on ne peut pas oublier, passer à autre chose, laisser tomber cette histoire et avancer dans le futur? Est-ce que ça nous fait progresser ou bien est-ce que ça nous ramène en arrière? C'est une vraie question.
I thought a lot about this question. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about when I write about this question, is it bringing us forward or is it bringing us back? It is a real important question.
Et j'en suis arrivée à la conclusion que nous devons raconter l'histoire parce qu'il faut faire un travail mémoriel. C'est-à-dire qu'il faut comment dire, il faut faire face et accepter. À un moment, il faut accepter que c'est arrivé. Je ne suis pas en train de dire de se venger. Au Cameroun, tu ne peux pas te venger en fait. Comme je disais tout à l'heure, nous nous sommes entretués.
And then I arrived at the conclusion that we need to do a work of memory, a work memorial. And this work is also, it is not to take revenge. It is, as we were discussing, it's not to take revenge, but it is important to remember.
Et il faut que nous acceptions que oui, c'est arrivé. C'est vraiment arrivé. Et ce n'est pas très vieux. Moi, je disais tout à l'heure, je vis en France. C'est des endroits où l'histoire est un narratif. C'est-à-dire qu'ils n'oublient rien. À chaque fois, ils s'arrangent pour se souvenir de leur histoire, de leur passé et de leur guerre, de leur mort, et ils réécrivent à leur avantage. Ce n'est pas de ça qu'il s'agit non plus. C'est d'un travail mémoriel d'acceptation et de sérénité.
And it is important to write this story. It is important to talk about it. As I mentioned that I live in France, and in France the work of memory, of writing is part of the narrative. It is taken into account, it is written, it is discussed, and it becomes part of your conscience in a certain way. So it's not only that, it is also to remember what has happened.
Et si nous n'écrivons pas, mais tous, c'est-à-dire que les historiens, mais aussi les scientifiques et les artistes, tout le monde doit écrire une version. C'est toutes les versions qui doivent exister parce que nous avons de bonnes raisons, d'excellentes raisons, de douter de notre histoire telle qu'elle nous est racontée par d'autres.
And it is the writers, we as writers who write, but also it is the artists to write about it, the historians, all of them need to write a version of the story. And that way we will have the story that will exist in more completion in a whole, in a certain way.
Yes. Because we can doubt of the story that other people have written about it. We have to doubt, and we have to make our own research, to make our own chemin.
Our own way.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Rachel, and I think the question I have, Beverly partly asked it, and you answered it, but I guess we could delve a little bit deeper. It's about, I think, home and writing. I'm Ugandan, and usually when Jennifer Makumbi publishes a book, we definitely want to have like a reception of sorts in the country and have everyone come and celebrate the book. And I was wondering if that happens with your books when you publish them in France. Do you also have time to get back to Cameroon and have people, attend festivals like this and listen to you talk about the book?
I always go back to Cameroon to present my books, but there is a problem. I don't know if it's the same here, but we really have this problem in West and Central Africa. The books are too expensive. Really, really too expensive. So even if I come with my books, I perfectly know that people will not cannot buy it. So what I've done for this one, but it's the first book I've done it and I will do it again, is that I kept my African rights and I gave it to an African editor so that he can publish the book in a lesser price, you see. So the book can be available, but it's not enough because l'editor, let me switch. L'éditeur est en Côte d'Ivoire et la logistique, c'est pas seulement une question d'argent. C'est une question de logistique. C'est tellement difficile de mettre la culture à la disposition des Africains.
But it's also the logistic, it's the whole supply chain. It's to put the entire thing in place, it's so expensive.
But every time, à chaque fois que je sors un livre, je retourne le présenter à Douala. Mais pas que. Je suis ravie, mais tellement de présenter mon livre à Nairobi.
So every time I return to Douala to present my book, I'm so happy, but I'm also very happy to present the book in Nairobi.
Yes. And everywhere, because this story, toutes ces gens, tout ce dont il est question dans mon livre, ce n'est pas que le Cameroun, c'est l'histoire de l'Afrique, c'est notre histoire.
So all that I present, all the characters, all the stories, this story is not only about Cameroon, it's about Africa.
Sorry if my French is bad, I'm just still learning in school, mais pensez-vous que le silence de la guerre, c'est levé maintenant ou c'est le même?
Bravo, non. Votre français est très bien. Il s'est passé quelque chose qui est l'autre côté du silence, ça s'appelle la cacophonie.
There is something that has happened that is the other side of silence, which is called cacophony.
C'est-à-dire que sans apprendre l'histoire, sans avoir éduqué les gens sur leur histoire, on a laissé tout le monde en parler.
So without really teaching it in school, without learning about it, we have left everyone now to talk about it.
C'est aussi une stratégie pour que l'histoire ne soit pas connue.
It's also a strategy so that the story is not known.
Parce que les personnes, c'est pas si vieux, c'est pas si ancien, c'est la génération de mes parents, ils sont toujours vivants. Les gens sont toujours au pouvoir et ils ne tiennent pas.
Because the story is not so old. It's quite new, it's quite recent. It's the story of my parents and the story...
They're still alive, they're still there. Et donc non, le silence est levé, mais ce n'est pas... Ce n'est pas construit. Il n'y a pas une volonté pour l'instant de construire. Et pourtant, énormément de Camerounais travaille sur cette histoire.
And so no, the silence has been lifted, but it has not been constructed. It wasn't constructed, and
A lot of Cameroonians work on it.
yeah.
So we are ready. We are just waiting the moment.
Hi. I'd like to ask a question about craft, because sometimes with African writers we get asked a lot of big questions about politics and history and memory, but we don't get to talk about craft very much. You were talking about translation and listening to, reading parts of your work in other languages that you didn't necessarily understand. And one thing you said was, I think about every single word I put on the page. And I wonder if you could just talk to us briefly about some of the craft decisions you make when you come to a book, whether you write in the first person or the third person, whether you write in the past tense or the present tense, how you construct voice.
Je crois que c'est une question de dynamique. Parfois, je ne décide pas d'avance comment je vais écrire. Si je vais écrire à la première personne, si je vais écrire même à la deuxième, ou si je vais être un narrateur. Il m'est
Because I want to get this right. So it's a question of dynamic. I don't always decide it. I don't always know whether I will write in the first person or the second person or the third person.
Il m'est arrivé d'écrire toute une partie à la première personne. Une 50aine de pages à la première personne.
It has arrived to me that I have written the whole part, like almost 50 pages that I will write in the first person.
Mais je sens que ça ne fonctionne pas. On le sent. Tu te dis, ok, ça avance, mais ça ne...
But I
ça
feel
marche pas.
that it is not happening. I feel that this is not the voice. So
Parce que parfois les personnages aussi, moi j'ai l'impression, parfois les personnages aussi veulent être racontés d'une certaine façon.
and sometimes the characters want to be recounted in a certain way.
Parfois ils veulent prendre la parole, parfois ils ont besoin que leur parole soit portée. Oui, je sais, quand je parle comme ça, on dirait de la sorcellerie. Mais oui.
But sometimes it's the personage, the characters who want to be talked about in the first person. Sometimes they want to go back. I know it seems like I'm talking about magic, but it's true.
Et il m'arrivait de changer, de partir d'un jeu et d'arriver au narratif, ou de partir du narratif et de revenir à un jeu. Et tout d'un coup, ça c'est clair. En fait, tu sens aussi que oui, c'est ça, c'est exactement ça. C'est la bonne. C'est une question aussi de tonalité.
And so sometimes I go, I'm building the narrative, I come back, and then I know that this is the way. I guess it is also about the tonality.
Tout d'un coup, tu sens que tu es dans la bonne tonalité pour raconter ce que tu es en train de dire. Et moi, j'aime bien alterner dans le même livre le jeu ou le narratif et parfois même le tu. Parce que tout d'un coup, ça fait comme une chorale.
And so I like to change between the narrative and the first person and the third person. Comment dis-je entre le jeu, le narratif et le tu?
Et le tu de you, the third, the second person.
So I guess the context making the narrative.
Yes.
The je will be like the conversation, and the you, the third person.
Yes. And yes. Et c'est ça qui donne comme une chorale, des voix qui se répondent.
Sometimes it turns out to be like a chorus, and it comes together.
Et aussi parfois, tu sens que tu dois épouser un personnage. Par exemple, si tu fais parler un enfant, tu peux pas le faire parler comme tu fais parler un adulte, ou si tu fais parler un homme ou une femme, ou un riche. Il y a aussi le vocabulaire que tu utilises en fonction des personnages.
And sometimes you feel like you need to tire a personality. So if you're talking to a child, you don't talk to the child in the same way as a man, a woman, someone who's rich or poor.
Thank you. Anyone with anything else burning? But also interesting about how you're able to get, you keep the rights for the African rights so that people here can get the books. And it's true, it's quite expensive getting books here, anyone knows. It asks the conundrum of, making the choice between which one you want to get, which one you cannot get. Nothing else? Do we still have to, I think we have space for one more then.
I'm just curious about when you talked about the silences. Do you think you have an advantage having gone away to be able to talk about what happened? Do the writers at home talk about these silences? Are they able to? And then the second part of it is also, is there I don't know whether to call it an indulgence when you're able to talk about this because you're away from it, and therefore you can indulge yourself and talk about it, and yet your children cannot connect to it. They are so removed from it. And the people at home cannot talk about it because they are caught in it. So does it give you some sort of privilege being away and therefore being able to write about it?
Maybe. I don't think it's a question of if I were in my country, it will be dangerous. I'm not sure today it will be dangerous to talk about it because everybody speaking is just a blah, blah, blah. And what I say will just be taken as other and not be considered. What makes it legitimate is also that I'm a writer well known abroad. And then when I write on it, they listen to me. You see? It's dommage.
It's unfortunate.
Yes, it is really. But it's also something I have to accept, that if I want to write on it, I have to write on the place I am and be conscious of the place I am. And I also need to be the link, because I won't wait my children to be 40 like I was when I discovered all the history, although I've been brought up in the country. They need to know it right now and to grow up knowing that. And it's also important that the story, to make a fiction, because in a novel, I can talk about the villages, I can talk about people, I can talk about the reality. And when I read my irregular verb. When I'm read in my country, they know, how do you say? They understand that I know what I'm talking about. I'm from there. I know what I'm talking about. It's not because I'm outside that I don't understand. I understand everything. This place is also my place. And yes, it gives you a position. And you have to know it. You cannot ignore that.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for your questions and very thoughtful responses from you, Hemley. There'll be more to come. I think you'll be signing books tomorrow. So get your copies and she'll be available for that. There's more sessions that'll be running from around midday, so do stay around for the rest of the festival. And thank you as well for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Douce, Ashanti, merci, Asante.